today that Brock Purdy actually suffered a concussion on Monday night's game and currently is likely to be out. Um, Kyle Shanahan said there is a possibility of him playing if he does clear concussion protocol by the time that um, Sunday comes around. But with the new concussion protocol, it's kind of hard to work all the way through that. And the last quarterback that was cleared by the time that the next game came around was actually last year, Kenny Pickett in week 6. But since then, the concussion protocol has become more difficult to clear because they're trying to cut back on letting players in early. What was your immediate reaction to hearing that Brock Purdy was concussed and that potentially Sam Darnold could be the starting quarterback going against the Bengals
So
for Sunday night?
it is interesting because I know over the last few years, roughly like 25 to 30% of players who suffer concussion will return the following week when the game is 6 to 7 days away, um, by what the NFL statistics have found. So a couple of players have done it this year, I believe two or three. Um, Passing through the protocol is per situation. It is not time dependent. It's per player on how their body reacts and how the concussion responds and how their brain responds. So I'm not expecting Brock Purdy to play at all.
No.
He got hurt on Monday night. We play Sunday. That's 5 days in between. I believe 6 days in between. So you're not expecting the quarterback to go. Now, the concussion protocol, there is five phases of the protocol. I believe he is in phase 1 or 2, as he did have walkthroughs, which states he has 3 phases to go. Now, if he's doing a walkthrough, depending on, I don't know if the NFL considers a walkthrough phase 2, which is aerobic exercise, or like, let me go ahead and find. I believe it's aerobic exercise in the sense of they're able to do walking stretches and they're dynamic exercises where they're able to do walking stretches and stuff like that. So I'm very curious to see how he goes in the protocol, because looking at from what I know, looking at the phase 1 through 5, he's probably in phase 1 because he's being introduced to limited stretching, balancing, and progressing to light aerobic exercise as tolerated, which means allowing the walkthrough. So he's probably in that in between phase 1 and phase 2. Now, if he fails one of the phases, he goes back to phase 1 no matter what. It's
Okay,
not
I
he does
didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
so
You
it
don't
is
just like
not.
stay in the phase you're in.
No, you do not stay in the phase you're in. You go, because for what happens is if you start feeling symptoms, you go back to that being your first day of phase 1. At least from my experience, as well as speaking to a few people that are better familiar with the concussion protocol in the NFL. So anytime a player fails in a phase, in the sense of in order to be passed on to the next phase, you cannot have any symptoms. Symptoms are such as headaches, and then all those symptoms that are like from concussions. So I'm not expecting him to play, which means Sam Darnold, right? That's interesting because a very big conversation throughout the offseason was Sam Darnold or Trey Lance as your backup quarterback. And this is a conversation that is interesting because few people wanted Sam Darnold. A lot of people wanted Trey Lance to be the quarterback too. This would be an opportunity to see what Trey Lance had looked like. We had only seen him for 4 to 5 games. Now, and the 49ers didn't want a quarterback controversy. They got rid of him. Now, if Sam Darnold plays really well or plays good and they win, you might have a quarterback controversy on your hands.
That's my question. Like, is this, maybe this is too far, but is this like kind of an audition for Sam Darnold? I mean, didn't Kyle Shanahan earlier this year called him like Steve Young, like Steve Young? I feel like Kyle Shanahan, there's always been rumors since 2018 that they were kind of trying to trade for Sam Darnold. I know when the Jets got rid of him, didn't they offer like a second or a first or something to get
I
him?
don't
But
I don't think it was a
the
first. It
Panthers,
might have been a second though. I'm not too
yeah,
familiar with what the draft was.
I know the Panthers outbid them, but they've been like in conversations to get him for a while. And every time Kyle, like, I feel like Kyle is Sam Darnold's number one fan. Like, we all need someone to think about us the way that Kyle feels about Sam Darnold. And the one good thing for like fan stake, and when we're thinking about this game, is I think Kyle likes to prove himself right. So potentially he'll set Sam Darnold up to look really good in this game. But yeah, it definitely is concerning if you think about the long-term implications where they're going into a bye week. So, coming after this game. So if he looks really good and the last memory of Brock Purdy is Purdy struggling, in that fourth quarter, he was 5 for 11, 2 interceptions for only 58 yards. I know some people, really quick, this is kind of backtracking, but some people have speculated maybe due to that concussion is why he performed pretty poorly. Kyle Shanahan was asked about this in his press conference and kind of shot down those rumors. He said nothing on film made him think that Brock Purdy was showing signs of a concussion while playing the game. And Brock Purdy himself said that he didn't feel anything until the plane ride. Do you think that we can blame any of that poor performance in that fourth quarter on a possible concussion or not? Really quickly.
I don't think so. And I'm gonna go off of personal experiences. I've had plenty of concussions in my lifetime, especially when I'm playing. I played basketball and had a few concussions, and as well as playing football. And for me, you don't really necessarily see. And I just want to clear it. Like he's at the highest level, so obviously, from my experiences, a concussion does not matter in terms of how hard you were hit. For example, from the doctors and the specialists that I've seen, you could get super duper hit hard, super duper hard to the head, and your recovery time could be a lot faster than someone who just got hit in the head at the right area and is causing more damage. So I just want to like make sure like people understand. People are like, oh, that's a hard hit. Just because it's a hard hit doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be out a long time. Now we've seen players who barely get hit be out a long time and stuff like that. So I don't think it's something we could say, oh, he threw interceptions because of the concussions. Now, I do know that if he was feeling symptoms after the game, that means he didn't. The adrenaline still was pumping. So I know there's times where I played through a few concussions, and I didn't feel it because the adrenaline's pumping. You're so hyped up and so going, you don't feel it. It feels like a regular hit to you. Next thing you know, you get to the locker room, you start feeling some type of way. You're like, oh, I feel off. And then next thing you know, you realize, whoa, everything's hurting. The lights are bright, like even the lights in the house are bright. You got a concussion. And it likely what happened, he started feeling a little dizzy, nauseous, and stuff like that, or felt a little off. We're on the plane ride, and they noticed it, like, hey, this isn't the normal Brock we have. Something's wrong. So it could be where the concussion did cause it, but I feel like that's an excuse. For example, players who play in the NFL that or at a high level, college and stuff like that, they would be the first ones to tell you if I'm injured, I should sit out and I should not affect my team. If I'm playing, that's because I feel like I'm not going to affect my team in a negative way. So I don't think it's right or okay to say those interceptions were because of the concussion, but I also don't think it's not like possible. Like it's very possible that those concussions affected it. So I'm in the minority of saying I don't think the concussions were a factor, especially because you heard Brock say he didn't feel symptoms. You heard Kyle Shanahan say they didn't feel like those were because of the concussion. So that's where I stand. It kind of sucks to talk about that because it sounds like I'm being insensitive to a concussion. I've dealt with plenty of concussions, so I understand the severity of concussions. I've seen specialists on it for myself.
You're not saying that, like, you're not saying. I feel like both of us agree that, like, if he was to go out now, that he's like clearly feeling symptoms, that would be bad. I don't think you're saying, that he didn't feel symptoms or have. I think you're saying like in the present moment.
Yeah.
His play was probably due to his
his own play. It wasn't,
and that would make sense because going into that, I think it was he is 20th in pass attempts, but was ranked 4th overall in turnover-worthy plays. So, like, prior to this game where he threw interceptions, he was throwing plenty of interceptable balls, and this was without any concussions or anything. So I don't think it's fair to blame his play on having a concussion or not. Especially
Yeah,
they're not even exactly sure when he got the concussion. I know that people have reported that it was during the
and
tush push type
the
thing
tush
that
push,
they
yeah,
did.
yeah.
Yeah, but that was if I don't know if you heard the way that Kyle Shanahan was prompted with that question. The reporter actually asked, and Kyle went to say like, "No, we don't know when it happened," and then the reporter
Hypothetically, goes,
hypothesized that
oh,
maybe
could
it
it
would
have
happen
been?
then, and Kyle was like, "Yeah, maybe like that makes sense,"
But
but
like
like
I
they
said
don't know
earlier,
exactly when.
yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, like concussions doesn't just because you got hit hard a certain like it looks hard, bad doesn't necessarily it means it's a concussion. That's why I see a lot of people like, oh, that's the concussion play. It doesn't have to be the concussion. There was a play earlier in the game where he got sacked. He could have hit the back of his head barely enough to cause a concussion. He could have had the concussion majority of that game. Just because it's a hard hit play doesn't necessarily mean it's a concussion. And I know from experience because my worst concussion came from the smallest hit to the head that I had, and it was because of an elbow playing basketball. It was my worst concussion, and I barely got touched. And the doctor's like, "This has been by far your worst concussion, like because of the exact spot you got hit, and it affects you too much." So I get people throwing that play around, but it's kind of weird to throw out and say that was the play when realistically we 100% don't know with concussions what play it was, unless a doctor says, yeah, this is the play that happened.
Okay, well, kind of moving on from that, we know whether or not we know when it happened. We know Brock Purdy is currently in concussion protocol, and that means that Sam Darnold might be coming in. Not and by my, I feel like if I was betting, I would 100% bet on Sam Darnold starting. Once again, no quarterback this year has entered concussion protocol the same week and then played that same week, and this was also on a shorter because it was on a Monday night. Um, do you think that Sam Darnold will look good? And if you think he looks good, do you think that that will mean anything for Kyle Shanahan's belief in Brock Purdy? I think we've spent a lot of time this year talking about the belief that Shanahan has instilled in Brock Purdy and the effect that that's had on the locker room. Do you think that if Kyle is able to scheme up a good game plan for Darnold and Darnold looks good, that that will cause any controversy among this fan base and moving forward? Or do you think that that would be way too early to even hypothesize about?
You're really setting me up to be the Brock hater right now. That's what's really happening right now. Everyone calls me a Brock hater for some odd reason, because I tell how I see it, and I haven't seen the player that everyone thinks is a top 10 quarterback, right? And I've said this on your show already once. And so for me, with the last two starts, there's a lot of concern there. When you look at some of the statistics, one of the statistics you threw out, 20th in passing attempts, but fourth highest in turnover worthy plays. Those turnover worthy plays become interception, become turnovers. The numbers catch up to
especially
themselves.
without especially without all his, every elite weapon healthy. We're kind of, or pressure in his face or gotta have it moments where we're kind of seeing if maybe it's not set up completely perfectly that some hiccups show up a little bit more. But go ahead.
Absolutely, especially when you're throwing with anticipation and you don't have the arm strength to put it on someone, right? Like you watch Brock Purdy, everything's anticipation, over the middle, anticipation throws. You're gonna have a lot of those turnover worthy plays in the sense of you gotta throw it out in front. Now, if something happens at the break point where the receiver goes to break, he slips up. The corner's physical enough at the line of scrimmage that throws off your timing. You're gonna get those turnovers. Now, it is a Sam Darnold audition. You've seen two bad games, and it looks like from what we've seen, it looks like Brock Purdy has struggled the last two games. Now, granted, Cleveland is one of the best defenses in the NFL. Gardner Minshew just put up 38 points on him, 30 points on him, right? So it's something to look at. Now, I'm not trying to be super critical of Brock Purdy because those are the two worst games we've seen from him. Now, what I am seeing is an opportunity for Sam Darnold to come out, play really well, win a game, going into a bye week. If you're going to change quarterbacks or change starters at a position, the bye week is the perfect time to do so. So I think the 49ers could definitely move on with